I'm a board member for Central Missouri Foster Care Adoption Association, so super passionate about the work you guys are doing. Are we all foster parents here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I adopted all 4 of ours.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful. And so I love being able to talk to this group of people. I think you guys are heroes. The whole theme here we're going to go is like a superhero motif because I really believe that if we can understand what's going on with these kids developmentally, what's happened because of their trauma, we can understand their behaviors better. We can be that superhero that you guys are already all doing. But hopefully with this presentation, you get a few more tips and tricks to do it even better. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. With such a small group, the more interactions and questions and talking, the better. If you don't understand something or tell me more about that, I'm more than happy to, I love getting small groups actually because it can be really tailored to what you guys want to learn about. So if you have something you want to learn more about or less about, just communicate that with me and we'll go. So be their hero, trauma informed. Like I said, we're trying to be heroes for these kids. They need them. First things first, a little trauma trigger warning. A lot of times when you talk about traumatic events, it can be triggering for people with their own trauma histories. And so if at any point you feel triggered, you want to take a break, you will not hurt my feelings if you want to get some air. Typically during my presentations, I normally get 1 person or 2 people that do that. And then if anybody wants to debrief afterwards, I'm here to talk about that kind of stuff too. So it's not that uncommon. And if it does happen to you, we're here to support you. That's fantastic. All right, so who am I? Who's this guy talking to you? My name is Josh Varner. I got my master's in school counseling way back in 2003 at a school called Wisconsin-Platteville. That's my beautiful family here. I was a college football coach for about 10 years. I always thought that's what I was going to do for a living forever. Then I met this beautiful blonde lady here, Ashley, and we got married. And then we started having a whole mess of these kids. Bing, 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 bing. And I want to be more involved as a dad is really what it came down to. And so college football is you don't get a day off about 6 months a year. You're working about 90 hours a week. And so I got out of that profession. I got into social work. So I had the master's in counseling, made that transition to social work. The reason why I bring all that up is that when I got into my first social work job, I felt like my master's did a really good job of teaching me how to label kids. Like I could come up and I could wield that big DSM-5, the diagnostic manual. Back then it was the DSM-4TR, and I could stamp kids all day, ADHD, bipolar, ODD, whatever, all the DDDs. I was really good at that. But what I really don't think I understood was what's going on with these kids, what happened to these kids, how do I actually help these kids? Good at labeling, wasn't so good at helping. And then about 10 years ago, I saw a trauma-informed speaker for the first time, and it totally shifted my paradigm. And I really got geeked up on the topic. I go to a lot of conferences, read books, try to learn as much as I can on the topic. Because when I learned that stuff, these kids made a heck of a lot more sense when I understood their experiences, understood what was going on with their brains, their behaviors made more sense, and ultimately I did a lot better work. And so 2 years ago, I was approached by the Amory Project, a board member there. It's a nonprofit in Jeff City. And they do a lot of educational programming. I was like, you have to get some trauma-informed speakers going. Let's go. And they were like, well, who's going to do it? And I'm like, somebody needs to do it. Well, they eventually wrote me into it, and 90 different talks later, I think I've done this about 90 times the last 2 years. I've done it everywhere from Chicago to Florida to you name it. It's really kind of gone all over the place. But I'm just passionate about sharing this message, hopefully giving people that aha light bulb moment that was given to me. And so if you guys get one of those moments today or understand a little better, then this is well worth all of our time. So what are we going to get done today? We need to understand how many kids are impacted by trauma. We need to understand how their bodies respond to trauma and how that impacts their brains and their behavior, okay? And then ultimately, hey, what helps these kids? What interventions is going to help these kids be successful? The first part, I'm not going to lie, the first maybe third of this presentation is not super happy because we're going to talk about some dire statistics. But just stay with me. We will definitely talk about some positive things, some positive stories, and talk about how we can get positive outcomes because we can do that with all children. All right, so why trauma-informed? Anybody here heard of the ACE study? Any ACE study, folks? Okay. I could do a whole hour-long talk about the ACE study, but most people will probably be bored with it. But I think it's super fascinating. So ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. They did this huge landmark study in San Diego. It's a longitudinal study that's actually still going on today. They did about 20,000 people in this study. Okay, really fascinating about why they did it. Originally, the guy was a weight loss doctor, and he found that he could get anybody to lose weight, but a certain segment of the population really, really struggled to keep the weight off. And he started interviewing those folks, and he just happened to have a little measure on his chart, and it asked how much did you weigh when you first became sexually active? And he starts looking through of all these women that put on the weight, And he saw things like 45 pounds, 35 pounds. And he's like, this can't be right. You must have misreported this. Well, it was accurate. They'd been sexually abused. And so he saw a correlation between weight gain and sexual abuse. Well, this doctor wanted to find out what other childhood traumas are affecting what other health outcomes, because he never in a million years imagined those things to be correlated, right? And so what they did is it was a large insurance group. So all the people in this study had pretty good insurance, had good jobs. There was a wealthy San Diego folks, about 85% white. About 75% of them, both parents had college degrees. So this wasn't an inner city Chicago study. This is more affluent than our community by far. And so this is the kind of data that they accumulated from that study, if that makes sense. And so how do they measure that? You're probably wondering. It was really simple that you could get a score between 0 and 10. And you guys can go online, you can get your own A score if you want to. And so if you dealt with emotional abuse and physical neglect, you'd have an A score 2. If you dealt with all 10 of these growing up, you'd have an A score 10. If you dealt with 0 of them, you'd have an A score 0. Does that make sense? And so really it's a very quick way for them to gather that information. And they wanted to see is how does that number correlate with health outcomes later on in life? So that's that's the research behind it. And if you guys want a copy of these slides, I have a paper copy. Actually, I could have brought you guys in. Some of you can follow me out to my afterwards. I can give you a paper copy. Or I can email you. I'll have my email at the end. I can email you the whole thing. Okay, so don't feel like you got to soak all this in at once, because I know it's a lot. And so, you can imagine that's the data they wanted to find. And what they found was that people that had 6 or more ACEs, their life expectancy was cut by 20 years. So we saw a huge decrease in life expectancy. And they found 1 out of 8. So in this affluent San Diego white community, 1 out of 8 kids had 4 or more ACEs. So this wasn't like 1 out of 100, or this is only those people that end up in prison kind of thing. This is 1 out of 8 had 4 or more ACEs. So what did 4 or more ACEs look like? This is not a complete list. Literally almost every single health outcome is measurable with a score. 5 out of 6 leading causes of death, the number's over double once you hit 4 or more ACEs. Okay? Here's some of the ones that really jump out. 3 times the level of lung disease, 11 times more likely to use intravenous drugs, 4 times more risky sexual behavior, almost 15 times more suicide attempts, 5 times more depression, 2 times more liver disease. And so you're seeing those risk factors for those serious diseases are going up considerably once we get to that threshold of 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. And you guys are all smart, so you're probably going, well, how the heck does emotional neglect lead to liver disease? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Yeah, and then you're already segueing into which I like. So what's happening here is you have that childhood trauma at the bottom. This is the lifespan of a human being. You have that childhood trauma. That childhood trauma actually disrupts how your brain develops, okay, down to cellular level. And what happens is people have social, emotional, and cognitive impairments because of that disrupted neurodevelopment. So they have a hard time connecting with other people, that social part. They have a hard time regulating emotions. So you see a lot of emotional flooding, where the anger's coming out, or they shut down, and you see people kind of lethargic and sad. You see both ends of that extreme, right? And then the cognitive impairment, they have a hard time learning. They have a hard time doing well in school. And what happens then is people adopt high-risk behaviors to deal with those impairments. So if I can't connect with you and I'm a young lady, maybe I engage in risky sexual behavior in order to make connections. I can't deal with my anger, so I drink all the time just to numb it all out, right? Et cetera, et cetera. I have a hard time learning in school, so it's a lot easier just to get kicked out in class than it is to stay in the classroom, okay? Those high-risk behaviors leads to the disease, like you said, liver failure, the disability, the social problems, ultimately early death. Now, the new research is showing us that only about 50% of your risk come from the high-risk behaviors. You can live a perfectly clean, healthy life, have that ACE score 4 or more. The other half of your risk factor actually comes from stress. And so the whole key to helping these kids that have had the adverse childhood experiences become healthy is A, we have to teach them positive coping skills so we don't have the high-risk behaviors. And B, we have to teach them to manage their own stress level. Because even without the risk factors, the high stress level will still lead to liver disease, lung disease. It tears up the body, and we'll kind of talk about why as we go along. And that's the newest research. They used to think it was all related to high-risk behaviors, and now they're finding that that's only about half of it. Does that make sense to everybody, how that kind of works step by step? All right, trauma explained. What makes a traumatic experience? The big thing here, guys, is trauma is the response to the event, not the event itself. Okay? Every human being is going to respond to trauma differently, and every traumatic experience differently. Okay? We saw that with the tornado here in town. I literally, there's some folks that got hit really hard by a tornado that are really well adjusted, that fine. Some people, my daughter, we weren't even in town, we were in Alabama, and her just coming home and seeing the wreckage, it was really tough on her emotionally. And so people are going to respond to that stuff way, way differently. We see that a lot with our veterans that go off to war, right? Two guys fighting side by side. One comes home severe PTSD, can't function. The other guys come home, it's like he never went. And so we're all going to respond, and the same thing, foster kids, they're going to respond to their life. Like some are unbelievably resilient, and some of them, some smaller things can really knock them off. And so it's really, we want to look at how people are responding and support them based on their responding, not based on what we think. And half the time we don't know, especially at that early childhood trauma. We don't even know what these kids have been through. Types of trauma, there's a couple I like to point out. This is not a complete list, but just because people need to realize how common these are. Sexual abuse, 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 girls in America are sexually abused by the time they're 18. I'm a dad of 2 girls, scary stat in the world to me. I don't think people realize how many people are dealing with sexual abuse. Boys aren't doing much better. 1 out of 5 to 1 out of 6 of our boys are sexually abused by the time they turn 18, okay? And our boys typically don't tell anybody for over 2 decades. And 80% of those boys will develop alcohol addiction. So the boys in some ways are doing better, but in other ways doing worse because they typically don't tell, they typically don't get treatment. The other one that's super common and super devastating is domestic violence. 1 out of 4 homes in our country has severe domestic violence going on. And so when you don't have a safe place to go home to, when you don't have a calm, supportive, loving environment, that does take a toll. And so we'll talk about how that happens as we go along. The big thing, for you guys, you'll see a lot of these behaviors with young kids. I don't want to read off the PowerPoint and do that whole thing. But if you're seeing changes in behavior, that's a big red flag. If you're seeing people acting like a younger child, they don't have the maturity of somebody their age, that's a big red flag. A lot of the stomach aches is a huge one I see, especially young kids. They don't have the ability to say, I'm really anxious or I've been hurt, but they can say, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts. We'll kind of talk about why as we go along there, okay? Here's some of those reactions with some older kids. You see a lot more risky behavior with the older kids, high-risk behavior, drugs, alcohol, risky sexual behavior, those kind of things. School problems is a big one. We see that a bunch. All right, educational impacts. I'll go through these real quick. But basically, research has shown the more ACEs a kid has, the more problems they're going to have in school. I think that's kind of a no-duh for most of us here. But it's going to impair their ability to have attention and concentration, cognition, creativity, and memory. It diminishes their social skills, their motivation, determination, effort. I talk to teachers about that all the time. Okay, so you think that kid's being lazy, but really he's a trauma victim. Okay, the research has shown that it impacts that stuff. Increased depression, and also their brains actually grow at a smaller rate. And we see that when we look at brain scans of severely traumatized children. We see increased expulsion, suspension, 50% of all absences are linked to trauma, decreased IQ and reading ability, lower GPA, lower graduation rate. So all the stuff that we're measuring. The latest research by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she's a leader in the industry. I'll pump her book out to you guys later. But they're finding, they're doing a ton of research in California on this, that kids with 4 or more ACEs are 32 times more likely to have academic and behavioral problems in school. I work in a school, okay? I work at Eldon High School in the Career Center there as a JAG coordinator. It's an at-risk program. If a kid has behavior and academic problems in school, I automatically assume they have an A score. That's pretty high because that's what the research is telling us. 32 times more likely to have those problems, okay? And so for me, it's pretty cut and dry. I don't need to know what those kids have been through to know they have a problem. I can look at what's going on in their lives and connect the dots. Okay, so Johnny's a real kid I'm going to talk about here. I got to meet Johnny as a social worker. Johnny was a 6-year-old boy. If you guys have been foster parent for a while, I bet you've heard a story just like this or experienced one. 6-year-old shows up in kindergarten. It's obvious his needs aren't being met. Clothes are ratty, not clean. He does not know how to function at all in schools. Doesn't know how to follow directions. Doesn't know how to use a spoon or a fork. He's just a wild man. They try to call home. Nobody answers. They make the hotline. Okay. Chosen Vision investigates. Mom's a meth addict, severe meth addict, and Johnny's removed from the home. And so we were really, really fortunate. We had a grandma that stepped in. She just retired like that week. Took the kid into her home. And the school was really great. They had a male counselor, a principal that was supportive. One of those kindergarten teachers, kind of like a snake charmer. I don't know if you've seen those ones and kind of get the kids. And so we had a really, really good team around this kid. And things started going a lot better. But it takes a long time. I think people realize stuff doesn't change overnight. So we got him removed first couple weeks of school. It was about February-ish where we started getting some positive results from this kid. And so he's starting to be able to follow the rules. He's starting to make friends. He's starting to be able to, he's starting to learn. A lot of these kids just flat out don't learn until they feel safe and comfortable. We'll talk about how that works later. But he's doing much, much better. And we're excited about that, seeing great progress. Cute, sweet little boy. Well, one day he was sitting at his little table, they're like down here in the kindergartens, and his school counselor came up behind him, tapped him on the shoulder, and Johnny turned around and blasted him in the face. I'm not talking like a little Lennox, little jab. I'm talking like Mike Tyson knockout. And he had the double nosebleed, and I get the phone call, the social worker that we always dread, and they said stuff like assault, possible safe school act, possible expulsion. I've been doing this long enough where you see if kids in foster care get kicked out of school, they tend to end up in residential facilities. Okay, you take a 6-year-old, put him in residential, we don't always get very good outcomes. So at this point, I really feel like Johnny needs a hero. He needs somebody to step up and be that life changer for him. And we're going to kind of talk about his story as we go along today. So let's talk about the brain. Okay, the brain's the most important organ you have, according to the brain. You ask those college kids, it's not the brain, guys. It's definitely the liver for them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that fake news. Okay, a little brain humor for you. So what's going on with Johnny's brain? All we're going to talk about today, guys, I'm not going to go through all the brain parts for you. I think you put us all to sleep if we do that. Front of the brain, back of the brain, thinking brain, emotional brain. That's all we need to understand in order to understand these kids. Okay? So the thinking brain is the super smart, advanced part of our brain. It's why we're the apex animal on the planet. It's why we have bridges, roads, this beautiful church, music, art. We have this super advanced frontal lobe. It's amazing. Okay? But the problem is it's slow. It's 5 times slower, 5 times weaker, but we have this amazing back of the brain that's laser quick. Okay? But we don't really get to control it. It's emotional, it's illogical, and it's autopilot. Okay? So this is kind of how it works. If we had a bear come charging through this room here and it's gnawing on this nice young lady's arm right here, okay, we don't want to be in the front of our brain. We don't want to be going, oh my God, how'd the bear get in here? Is she going to be mad if we run away?
I'm shooting that bear.
Is she going to be mad if I run? Because I saw that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and bears are pretty tough.
Yeah, they are.
Where'd the bear come from? Man, I'm just trying to get home and feed my kids tonight and bear has to attack. If our brains worked that way, we probably would never got out of the caves, right? We'd have all gotten eaten a long time ago. But the good Lord bless us. We have this automatic system. There's this little thing called the amygdala in our brain. It's your smoke detector. And if it perceives a threat that's life-threatening, it automatically flips a switch, and the front of the brain literally shuts off. We can see this in brain scans. This thing shuts off. This is powered on, and this is autopilot. The back of the brain is autopilot. We're allowed to do 3 things, and our brain picks it for us. What are they? Does anybody know what they are? Fight, flight,
fight, flight,
and freeze. So our brain is going to pick one of those 3, whichever one our brain thinks is going to keep us alive. And we don't even get to pick, and we don't even control it. Okay? And so if you're getting mauled by the bear, what do the rest of us 3 hope we get? No offense, but
you're hoping.
We're hoping we get flight, right? We get flight, and we survive. We pass our DNA on. You probably aren't going to make it. Sorry, bears are undefeated. But the rest of us live, and that's good for our species, right?
Kids for you. Okay.
Yeah. That's good for our species. That's how we work. Okay. But there's an interesting part of the brain called that amygdala, and it remembers every traumatic experience you've had your entire life. It remembers every single traumatic experience you've had your whole life, and it'll remember all the sensory information so that if any of those things that we picked up before the bear attack happen, it'll get us to the back of the brain quicker. And you think about it, that's pretty advantageous. So if we heard that bear clawing outside the door, and we're like, I wonder what that is. We didn't do anything. Well, next time we hear the bear clawing, we're not going to wait for the bear to get in here. We're going to fight, flight, freeze. As soon as we hear the bear, or we smell the bear, right? Or we see bear droppings. All these things, all these warning signs, we're going to remember that next time. And our amygdala will automatically trigger us back to the brain. All right? And so an example of that is like our veterans. They go to the beautiful 4th of July spectacular. They come home from Fallujah. They're at the 4th of July, and boom, fireworks are going off. Well, that guy's amygdala says concussion sound means what?
Bomb.
It's a bomb. It's war. It doesn't say, hey, it's Eldon firework extravaganza. It doesn't get to run that through the front of the brain, right? As soon as it boom, the front of the brain shut off, triggers the back of the brain. The back of the brain saying bomb, 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 flight response. He's going to hit the ground.
I see my son hit the ground.
Okay.
During 4th of July.
Okay. And that's a fight, flight, freeze response, right? And it's automatic. He's not making that choice, right? His amygdala is keeping him safe, keeping him alive. And that's why our brains are designed to do it, okay? And so, when we got Johnny, I brought this piece of paper into that meeting. Okay, and we talked about it. We said, hey, for a normal kid, my son, for example, he's a little rambunctious, but if you tap him on the shoulder, he's going to look and be like, who is it? Hey, how you doing? But for a kid that's growing up in a home with a meth-addicted mother and all the bad people that come with that, what's a tap on the shoulder mean? To his brain. His amygdala is saying, you're being attacked.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and he had a great fight response, and that fight response kept him alive all those years where he was in that rough home, right? And so it was amazing because I'll never forget it. That school counselor's nose is packed up with gauze, and I'll never forget the way he looked at me, and he said, why would this kid do this to me? I love that kid. That kid loves me. We have a great relationship. I can't understand how he punched me in the face. But when we talked about the brain, we understood the brain. The whole conversation shifted away from Safe School Act, expulsion, how do we get rid of this kid, to, man, what's this kid been through? How do we support this kid? How do we love this kid? How do we help this kid? And that's the transition, I think, that happens when we become trauma-informed. And so they didn't kick Johnny out that day. We figured out hey, touching Johnny when he's not looking is a trigger for Johnny, right? How do we support Johnny? How do we help Johnny? So all that stuff kind of makes sense to everybody?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you another example. My daughter, Claire, just got glasses. She's 8 years old. And my wife came home. My wife was all upset. She's like, Claire was super pumped. She got these cute glasses with a bow on them. She's like, Dad, I get glasses just like you. She's so excited. My wife's mad. Oh, why does Claire have to have glasses? I'm like, what's the big deal? Her glasses. She's like, it's not fair. Why does she have to have it? It's not fair. And I'm like, honey, I don't know if you know how genetics work, but 50-50, you guys get it. We'll have glasses here. And so I was starting to think, like, okay, if the response and doesn't match the event, think trauma. If the response to the event don't match up, think trauma. So I asked my wife. My wife doesn't have glasses. I was like, did you ever go to the optometrist as a kid? Like, what's going on here? Well, her mom died when she was 7 years old, and she had a lazy eye, and she had to go in and get the drops. And she said, when I was 7, I went in. I felt so alone. I felt so scared when I went to the optometrist. Well, guess what her amygdala did 30 years later when she took her daughter in there? She felt alone. She felt scared. And once my wife understood that and we made that connection, that fear dissipated, that moment went away. And guess who should probably go to the optometrist next time? Me, right? But isn't that amazing? 30 years later, her brain remembered all that stuff because her brain recognized that as a threat. So that shows you how powerful that response is and how well that amygdala will pick up threats. And we all kind of have stuff like that if we're honest. All right, so fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze isn't always punching, running away, and staying still. It will be those things sometimes, but I see this stuff a lot more often. Instead of fight, punching, I see way more hyperactivity. I see way more verbal aggression, oppositional behavior, physical aggression, bouncing off the walls. I see that stuff way more often than I see punching. Okay? That's a fight response. Flight, withdrawal, escaping, isolation. I see way more isolation and avoidance than I see kids actually running. And then flight, that's that dazed look when the kids just check out and you're kind of like, hey, you here, bud? Come on back. I see that a heck of a lot more than I see the catatonic kid, in a residential facility. Okay, that's a freeze response. But the big deal is look for moments when the intensity of the response doesn't match the intensity of the stressor. If they're not lined up, we should be thinking trauma. You said it with your own son, right? We know that if he's hitting the ground on 4th of July, that stress and that response aren't lined up, think trauma. Johnny, if you get tapped on the shoulder and you punch somebody, stress or response.
He was my oldest son. He was in the Army, Afghanistan 4 times, Iraq once. Yeah, right.
Like, how could he not? I mean, you think about how much trauma that is to go on 5 deployments.
With you saying that, I took the 2 oldest ones to the fair this year, and there was I don't know what, it was one of those games where they blow up the balloons and it pops really loud.
Yeah.
It sounds like a gun going on.
Yeah.
Well, it was a really bad trigger for Jackson, my oldest, because he watched his real dad get shot 4 times.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, the guy who needed crossed him to shoot his dad 4 times.
Wow.
And he was on top of 3 of his brothers. The baby wasn't born yet. So,
Wow. So obviously his brain associates that sound with that horrible, painful moment, and it brings it all back.
And I had to tell him, it's okay. It's okay. Nobody's shooting a gun. It's fine, but every time it went off, it just...
His body it doesn't matter. Like, and once again, he doesn't get to choose that response, right? Just like you talked about.
Exactly.
His brain's doing it automatically. That's a very good source. Thanks for sharing that. And so, guys, these are the ones I see a heck of a lot more. And so like I said, familiarize yourself with these because this is the stuff we see a lot more than that traditional fight, flight, freeze. Okay? Triggers, okay? We have to consider what's setting people, and you sounds like you're really good at identifying triggers. You named a couple already. Because if we can figure out what the triggers are, we can figure out what the amygdala is setting off, we can remove the triggers. Hey, we're not going to 4th of July, or we're not going to the fair, or we can teach them to cope. Some of these triggers we got to deal with because they're part of life. Yeah. And we got to learn, hey, when this happens, you're going to use this coping skill. That's the 2 ways we can handle this stuff, okay? And so here's some of the really common ones I see. Unpredictable or sudden change. These kids do not feel safe. They do not feel safe unless they know exactly step by step what's going to happen next. That's the only way they can predict their safety. And so if we're going to break a routine, it's super important to have that conversation. But the more their routine, they wake up, they go to bed, every step. I talk to the educators. I've done this the vast majority of the time. I've done this conversations with educators. I talk to them about the importance of that. I know in my classroom, I literally start the day the exact same way every day. I give those kids that same routine. And it's like clockwork. They know what to expect with me. Transitioning from one setting to another. For a lot of high school kids, it's that hallway time. They really have a hard time transitioning. Okay, so you might have a hard time going from school to that after-school activity, right? Or from one activity to another activity. Those transitions can be tough. The more we can have conversations and prep them, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to do this. All right, let them know what's going on, the better. Loss of control, okay? Feelings of vulnerability or rejection. Holy cow, if you've ever been a teen before, those are pretty common, right? Confrontation with authority or limit setting. We're going to kind of talk about that, all right? We never... it's not that we don't hold people accountable, because they have to have super predictable accountability every single time. But once they're already triggered, we don't want to, that's not the time to have that discussion. All we want to do with a triggered kid is calm them down. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Loneliness and then sensory overload. Sometimes some environments are way too stimulating, kids can't handle. I know at my last school, some kids couldn't do all school masses. Some kids couldn't do assemblies. There's way too many people going on there. How can they know that they're going to be safe when I'm in a room with 800 people? You know, and so we got to figure out, the fair might be too stimulating for some of these kids, right? And so just kind of figuring out, hey, this kid does well in this environment. This kid doesn't do well in this stimulating environment. I got to get them an environment where they can be successful. Because every kid's going to be different. Remember, the primary function of the trigger response is to help that kid be safe. And so just remember, this is a fancy way of saying the brain's doing what it's designed to do. With your son, when he hits the ground, the brain's doing what it's designed to do. It's keeping him alive. You think it cares if it's socially awkward that he hits the ground on 4th of July? No, it's going, you didn't get blown up in Fallujah or Afghanistan or wherever. That's a heck of a lot more important to the brain than, hey, this looked weird. Which one do you think the brain's going to side on? You know, every single time it's going to side on safety. Safety, safety, safety. All right, trauma changes the body too. So every single time you're in a real life or death situation or you've been triggered, your body does all these things. It's important to know that. Your body doesn't know. Doesn't know if the threat's real, you're in Afghanistan, or it's 4th of July fireworks. Your body doesn't know the difference, so it's going to ramp you up every single time. Okay? Most of these you can't see. I think it's kind of funny, the left list, because most of these you can't see. I can't ever tell if the kids' pupils are dilating. I can't tell if their mouth's dry. I can tell if their muscles tense. And most of the time I see kids clench their fists. That's a good indicator. You feel them like kind of getting tight. You see them getting tight. That's a good indicator they've been triggered. The heart's going to bump faster. The breathing increase. Sometimes you'll see that kid kind of hyperventilating. That's a really good sign they've been triggered too. Okay? If they start sweating, obviously. But most of the stuff's happening below the surface. Every time they've been triggered. For some kids, this is happening 15 times a day. It really is. Some people, it's once a month. All right? But every single time, the brain's preparing the body for actions. Life or death. Does not know the difference. So the adrenaline is getting dumped in your bloodstream. All right? Your blood pressure is rising. Your lungs actually taking more oxygen. The liver is going to dump glucose into your bloodstream. I had a diabetic come up to me and he's like, every time I get triggered, my blood sugar gets all screwed up. Do you think that has something to do with this? Heck yeah, it does. Because you're dumping all that sugar in there and then it's gone. You see a lot of people get super tired after they've been triggered. Their blood sugar is nothing. It goes down. Because all it cares about is surviving that moment. Digestion slows down or ceases. This is why you see so many kids, oh, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts. Well, your body doesn't care about digesting Chipotle if you're in a fight or flight free situation. It's going to shut all this stuff down. It doesn't matter. We'll worry about that later. And it's going to send all those resources to keeping you alive. Okay? And the last one, cortisol, super fascinating. Okay, it's a brain hormone. It'll actually depress your immune system. So you see people get sick a lot more of their trauma victims. Because every time their body's going, I don't care about fighting that cold off. We got to survive this newest threat. And so if that system's getting turned off over and over and over again, you can imagine those kids are going to get the flu, the colds, et cetera, pneumonias, all this stuff a heck of a lot more often. They can actually measure your cortisol levels in your saliva now, and they're doing super cool research with that. One is they found out that we have this thing called epigenetics, and it's not nature versus nurture. It's actually your past it actually changes your genetics, turns little markers on and off. And so if your descendants went through trauma, at least two generations, they found that you're going to have a higher stress response based on your past family members. And so they did research on African Americans that were descendants of slavery, and they found that they have higher stress hormones at birth than just people that didn't have descendants of slavery, other African Americans. And they saw it with Holocaust survivors. So descendants of Holocaust survivors have higher stress levels at birth, higher levels of cortisol than kids that didn't go through that. And so, but if you guys think about it, it makes sense, right? If I went through some really horrible stuff, my descendants better be ready to deal with stress. And that's the body's, once again, way of keeping us alive and keeping us safe. All right, this looks complicated, but it's really not. It's going to kind of help everybody understand this, okay? This, between the dotted lines, is the fancy term for that's called the window of tolerance. Okay, that's where I'm in control of my behavior and I'm in control of my emotions. All right? And so, depending on your life experience, you know some people, you got that one crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, his window of tolerance is about this big, right? It doesn't take a whole lot to get him above or below the dotted line. Some folks, man, they got infinite window of tolerance. You can't ever get them off their thing. And so we talked about with epigenetics, you know, if your family history has a lot of stress and trauma in it, you're going to have a smaller window of tolerance than somebody whose, you know, family history is not that. But basically how it works, okay, if I'm under control, I'm between the dotted lines, I'm driving through the roundabout in Jeff City and somebody about clips me like they do about once a week, okay? I'm one of those guys that gets a little animated in the car, so I might shake my fist, rabble, rabble, rabble. But you know what? I get mad. My wife's always like, you don't have to get mad. I'm like, I kind of get mad. But I'm not up here. I'm not getting out of my car trying to fight somebody, right? You don't know that guy. Nobody wants to be that guy. Don't get out of your car, right? And same thing, I have a 2-year-old son who doesn't believe in sleep. He hasn't slept 8 hours his whole life. And this morning I was tired. I did not want to get out of bed and drive down to Eldon. But you know what? I'm not down here where I'm like, I'm just calling in and going, I'm not going to work, right? But what happens is when you experience trauma, and the more trauma, the more likely you're going to have that smaller window of tolerance. It keeps you out of that window of tolerance. You get stuck on, you get stuck off. All right? And so stuck on is that hyperactivity, that exaggerated startle, I can't relax. I got to keep myself safe, right? You're constantly looking around like, how am I going to keep myself safe? I can't relax. I can't be... You have an emotional flooding, you get super angry, and then maybe you're super sad. You know, you're really having a hard time with that stuff. What diagnosis are we giving all those kids that are stuck on? Think about when they're just constantly looking around. ADD, ADHD, right? Way too often, we're diagnosing kids ADHD, they're just stuck on. They're hypervigilant because they've been hurt. And guys, think about it, it makes sense. If you've been hurt, are you going to be on high alert? Where's the next pain coming from? That's human nature, right? Guys, this is not a disorder. This is the brain functioning the way it's designed. Okay, this is the brain functioning the way it's designed. Well, if you're stuck on for 8 straight days, what eventually is going to happen to your energy level?
Bottom.
You're bottoming out. I don't care who you are, right? I don't care who you are. Now you're stuck off. Now you're depressed. You got that flat effect. You're kind of glazed over. You're tired. You can think of people like this, right? What diagnosis do we love giving those folks? Depression, major depressive disorder. That's the fancy one, right? And so now this person's depressed. Well, really, guys, they're stuck off. You know, they're below that window of tolerance dotted line because their trauma history. What happens? They're stuck on, stuck off, stuck on, stuck off, back and forth. Bipolar. Okay, guys. When I did social work, I worked with 30 kids at a time. Every single one of those children were diagnosed bipolar. Every single one. Well, guys, guess what? I worked with them all. Every single one of them had extensive trauma history. Extensive. They weren't bipolar, guys. This is the natural, normal way for brains to respond to traumatic events. They're going to be stuck on, they have PTSD is what they really have, if you want to use the diagnostic manual, okay? Just like these kids don't have ADHD, they're stuck on, they have PTSD. Just like these kids don't have depression, they're stuck off PTSD. And the problem with a lot of our psychiatrists is they don't even ask anybody, tell me about your life history. They just look at symptoms. Well, if you're looking at symptoms, this does look like ADHD. This does look like depression. This jumping back and forth looks like bipolar. But guys, they're missing the boat. The trauma is, in my experience working with children, I would say 95% of the time it's trauma caused. That's why we see this epidemic of ADHD, this epidemic of bipolar. Really, we're just misdiagnosing. And I'll be honest with you, stimulants don't work for PTSD. ADHD meds don't work. Depression meds don't work for PTSD. Bipolar meds don't work for PTSD. Okay? So a lot of times we're misdiagnosed and we're getting the wrong treatments and they don't work. And we'll talk about what works here in a little bit. Okay? And I'll be honest with you guys, if you talk to a lot of mental health professionals, they'll disagree with me on this. There's a big split going on right now in the mental health community. There's a lot of people that are on the trauma side like me, and there's a lot of other folks that just want to label and medicate.
That's just because they want to, it's a, what am I trying to say? A pharmacy world.
Yes. Again, we do it with every health condition, right? Instead of saying, hey, you got to eat better, well, let's give you insulin.
Yeah.
And so my point is, and I'm not saying some diagnoses aren't proper. If you're stuck on and off all the time, you have a score 0, you probably are bipolar, right? If you're acting like this all the time and you don't have any trauma history, maybe you're ADHD. I'm not saying this stuff doesn't exist. I'm saying that way too often we're misdiagnosing. And we have to look at the whole human experience. This is a normal reaction, okay? The way I like to describe it is if I get on top of this church and I fall off and break my leg, do I get diagnosed broken leg disorder? No, you fall off buildings, you break, that's normal, right? This is normal. This is the normal human experience. If you go through trauma, this is how your brain's going to respond, okay? And that's why I don't like all that disordered labeling. It doesn't help. Yes, ma'am.
I think kids get medicated too much.
Wait, amen. Preach. Yes.
So too. And
Some kids are on like 8 or 9 freaking medications.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm just staying.
Oh, you're fine, sir.
We had a child that had medicines terrible,
Yeah.
and he was a handful. We got him off of everything. I'll argue with the doctor. I'm not a doctor, but
Yeah.
they're not with these kids all the time.
Amen.
We are.
Well, here's the deal. If you go to an auto repairman, he's going to try to fix a car, right? You go to a psychiatrist, they're going to try to give you medicine.
Yeah.
Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, and so that's the only tool he has in his toolbox to deal with these problems. And so he's going to always,
Yeah.
but I'll be honest with you, I worked for a psychiatrist that got, and you can look these docs up online. I worked for one that was getting $125,000 a year from drug companies, and he prescribed ungodly amounts of medication for little kids. I'm talking 5-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And I turned it into my bosses, and they were not happy that I even brought it up. And so I encourage you, check your doctors, make sure that they aren't getting, because there is some conflict of interest there, in my opinion. They call it speaking money, but at the end of the day, like, you're getting that kind of money for
We
medications.
have one that works well with
Yeah.
us.
So we have a doctor that
She works well with
she
us.
actually has agreed with us and dropped medicines
Mhm.
That's
instead
awesome.
of adding them on.
That's awesome.
Because she knows we're very anti-medicine,
Yeah.
and
I mean, if they need it, they need
And
it.
don't get me wrong, medications can be awesome short-term solutions too,
Yes.
right? Like a lot of times we can't learn the coping skill until maybe that medication gives us a bridge to help teach that coping skill,
Right.
or get that kid to feel safe with you. And so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, but really our medications are masking the problem. They don't solve it.
Yeah.
You don't get cured from being bipolar with a medication, right? You can, just like alcohol doesn't, it masks it short-term. Marijuana will mask it, but it doesn't solve the problem. And so I don't want to come off as, yes, exactly. We have to deal with the root. And you've given me my segue in my next slide.
You have to learn how to do it.
No, you're good. I like it. I like it when you guys are always one step ahead because you're a smart audience. But we got to heal the root. Guys, I've seen so many people go from an eating disorder to being a workaholic. Mm-hmm. Going from having a drug addiction to having alcohol addiction or a sex addiction or whatever addiction. Because guys, there's so many different ways. They're actually finding with eating disorders now that, our guts getting shut off all the time with those traumatic events. Well, what's your brain naturally going to tell you when you keep shoving food in your mouth and your body won't digest it? Puke it up or don't eat it. Mm-hmm. And so that's at the root of so many of our eating disorders, that trauma piece.
That's what we had last year.
yeah.
But yet how many times, and they're starting to do this now, but we didn't even ask those kids about their trauma history. We just try to put them on an eating plan. Well, if their body can't digest the food, naturally their brain's going to tell them don't eat it, right? Mm-hmm. And so we get down there and we heal this root trauma. Guess what? All these problems go away. Mm-hmm. All these kids. You know who the number one group for suicide is right now? Is highly educated, 65-year-old plus white males. Number one group, highest risk for suicide of any group. And the reason why is guess what? They dealt with their trauma by being workaholics. And I know a lot of men like this. My dad was like this. Okay, he's struggling in retirement. I'm going to work. That's my identity, work. And then what happens? You have to retire at some point, right? You retire, and what happens when you retire? All that pain comes flooding back. Mm-hmm. And that's how you dealt with it forever. Well, now how am I going to deal with it, right? And so we got to deal with that root pain, or it's going to express itself in a lot of different ways. Okay? The good news, the people you work with, guys, they can change so rapidly. Young people, their brains, there's something called neuroplasticity. We all have it. Even people my age, our brains can change, okay? And we can learn new skills. And our brains are constantly rewiring themselves, so you can go through a lot of trauma, but if your world is safe and supportive, and you guys obviously provide that all the time, the brain is being rewired that the world's a safe place, a good place, okay? But young people rewires itself a lot quicker. And so that's the really, really cool part, is that you're working with people that can change a lot quicker. Now, I would say invest in children, man, because they can change so much quicker than adults can. All right, tools. I love Batman because he's got tool belt, right? I don't have any superpowers. And so you guys, same thing. Get your tool belt out and you're being superheroes for these kids. Counseling. You got to use evidence-based counseling to help with trauma. Okay, way too often we're sending people to talk therapy. Well, if I'm talking about my most traumatic event to a therapist, am I going to be in the front of the brain or the back of the brain?
I'm in the back.
You're going to be in the back of the brain. In the back of the brain, you cannot learn a new skill. You cannot process. You cannot deal with your trauma in the back of the brain. So what we're doing is we're sending people into therapy. We're triggering them to the back of the brain. It's super painful. And they, a lot of times, end up being worse off, or they end up quitting treatment. We see this a ton with our vets. We made them do talk therapy forever. I talked to a vet the other day. They kept making me go talk therapy, and then I'd have flashbacks, and then I'd be suicidal, and then start me on the spiral. Well, for a lot of people, depending on how severe your trauma is, if you're being triggered in therapy, then talk therapy is not going to help you. It's actually going to make things worse. So we have to understand, is it a front of the brain, back of the brain? Is this going to work? Okay? So the stuff that we know works, cognitive processing therapy, you can't find it around here. I'm sorry, but it's good. Prolonged exposure is good. It works, but we have really high dropout rates. So prolonged exposure is, hey, what are you afraid of? We're going to make you experience it over and over again, and we're going to make your brain realize that it's not scary. So if you're afraid of that bomb sound, we're going to make you experience that. Well, guess what? That's pretty terrifying, right? And so a lot of people just quit because they're like, I'm sick of being triggered. This is really this is painful, uncomfortable, so they quit. But if they stick with it, it does work, but people drop out like crazy. The best one, I think, is EMDR. And I know you can get this in Jeff City. I have a great therapist if you want a recommendation on it. And it's really weird. It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And they actually have you follow the finger back and forth and you talk about traumatic events. And what it does is it's actually helping the brain release that event and process it. And we're not quite sure exactly how it works. There's a lot of different theories, but it's really evidence-based. Within 10 sessions, it works by 80% of the time. And people are cured from their PTSD. And so when I first heard about it, I was like, this is BS. Let me read the research. And you read the research over and over again, it works. It really does work. Some people think it's based on when you fall asleep, your eyes flicker like this. In REM sleep, they actually think that heals the brain. Well, what happens is when people experience a lot of trauma, they have night terrors. They never get into that REM cycle. And then we put them on medications that prevent them from getting in the REM cycle. And so they don't actually get that brain healing. They think this stuff replicates that, heals the brain. But they're not quite sure how it works. Okay. Next level treatments. They're doing some really cool stuff with vets now where they actually, this is experimental, but it's been working really well. There's this thing called the vagus nerve that goes from your brain to your organ system. And they will actually block out that vein, and it'll prevent you from having fight, flight, freeze responses. And then they actually put them into therapy, and they can process their trauma because they stay in the front of their brain. And they've found that that's super duper effective too. Shots only last a couple months, so they have to keep redoing them, but they're hopeful that by getting the good therapy that you'll be cured. The last one that's super exciting is they give MDMA, which is the active ingredient ecstasy. They can't do this in the United States. But it turns off the amygdala. So once again, it turns off that fight, flight, freeze response. They do 8 hours straight of psychotherapy. So they have 2 therapists checking in or out. You're on that drug. And they do 8 hours of psychotherapy, and they're cured after one session. They have 8 hours straight. So you have a lot of veterans actually fly to Europe to get it because you can't get it in the United States. But the VA has fast-tracked it, and they think within 2 years they'll be doing them at the VAs here in the United States. Because they have to get that drug declassified. Because of what it does, if you think about it, once again, shut off the amygdala. The amygdala, they took the dang battery out of the alarm, right? Now I'm in the front of the brain. Well, now I can process that traumatic event I went through. So now we're starting to understand how the brain works. The treatments are getting better. Because for a long time, the stuff we were doing was not working. And we see this with the high suicide rates of our veterans. But because of the big outcry and outpour, they put a ton of money into research, and we're starting to find stuff that does work. And obviously, guys, the brain works the same way for a foster kid that it does for a veteran. It's same responds exactly the same way. So if you have a kid, I just recommend looking into that EMDR if they have extensive trauma history. If they have a hard time with talk therapy, if they get upset every time they talk to a therapist, EMDR might be a lot better fit. If you need a therapist, email me. I got a good one. It's my wife's favorite therapist, Target. It's about $100 a session. She goes and gets toilet paper and comes back with a dress and some shoes. But happy wife, right?
It's my
happy
therapy.
wife. Is that your therapy
That's
too?
my therapy.
Okay. You got the same therapist, huh? Yeah.
It doesn't last long.
The big but like I said, about once a week, right?
Yeah, it doesn't last long. It's just like,
It's a quick fix
it's
for
an
the day.
immediate. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
So that EMDR is a lot cheaper, guys. You might just, so I
Well,
tell
I don't
my
know.
wife.
I guess I got my quick fix over the weekend.
Yeah.
I spent and spent.
Social-emotional skills. Okay, why do they matter? Real quickly, you can take a 4th grader, 3rd grader, and predict whether or not they'll graduate college based on the social-emotional skills. Here at Eldon, we just started teaching 2nd step in our elementaries. It's social-emotional programming. And because the bottom line is, if the kids have these skills, they do well. If they don't do well. And so why are we teaching them in schools? Well, we are here on Eldon now. So I'm excited to see that. So what are they? That's your self-awareness. So can you recognize your own emotion? I teach high school kids. A lot of high school boys can't say, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm anxious. They don't even realize that emotions are happening. Your self-management is your ability to manage that emotion. So what do you do when you're anxious? What do you do when you're depressed? What do you do when you're angry? Do you have a way to cope with that? Empathy. This is a big one. When I was growing up, if I want to pick on you, I'd be like, hey, print shirts are cool, striped cool shirts aren't. And I'd have to make fun of you, and I'd feel, you guys laugh, and I'd be like, look how cool I am, I'd feel awesome. Well, then I'd go home, and I'd remember how you looked, and I'd feel bad because I'm an a-hole, and I said something mean. But it was his facial recognition that made me realize what a jerk I was, right? Well, how are kids bullying each other today?
Yeah.
Right here, right? Well, are they getting any of that facial recognition when they say mean stuff on Snapchat? And so it's not their fault they're not getting that wiring. We have to have way more conversations with kids to help them understand. It's not their fault. That's the world we put them in, And so we got to have conversations. Well, how would you feel? How would you feel if that was your cousin? How would you feel if that was your mom? Whatever. Having those conversations so they can put themselves in their person's shoes because they're not getting the wiring that we got when we grew up. Okay. Relationship skills. A lot of these kids grew up in a home where people didn't have relationship skills. They didn't say, hey, I disagree with you, and man, maybe we should consider my perspective. No, it's cream corn's getting thrown across the room and somebody's dropping an F-bomb, right? And so we shouldn't be surprised.
I was going to say,
Has he been depressed?
We shouldn't be surprised if they don't have those skills if they have never seen them.
Yeah.
And so they'll say, hey, because a lot of these kids can make friends, they can't maintain them. And so they'll have that conversation. Well, what happened there? Hey, do you think that maybe that made that person feel that way? How can you repair it? How can you apologize? Like taking them step by step, and they got to practice and fail, but eventually get there. And then responsible decision making. Obviously, these kids struggle. Self-regulation. So once again, if you can regulate your emotional state, you can focus, you can sustain your attention, you do well in school. And so, like I said, I'm super pumped we're teaching that at Eldon and elementaries because I know when these kids come up through, it's one of those things that's probably a 20-year investment, right? We're spending time with kindergartners right now. Well, guess what? By the time they get to high school, their ACT scores are going to be better, their attendance is going to be better. All these things we measure, graduation rates, GPA, it's all going to be better because they're going to have these foundational skills. And so, bravo to them. So parenting interventions. So what do we do with Johnny at home? First thing, what do we do when the kid's triggered? First thing, take a deep breath, man. That kid's in the back. Ask yourself, the first thing I do with the kids I work with, I just think, are you in the front of the brain or the back of the brain? Oh, you're in the back of the brain, I can tell. So I just take a deep breath. Oh, all right, here we go. We're going to do this back of the brain. I have a 2-year-old. He's in the back of the brain pretty much all the time. Those 2-year-olds.
My 2-year-old.
Yes, they're in the back of the brain all the time. He's coming up. He don't know he's doing half time. But calm creates calm. Chaos creates chaos. If you're calm, you're going to be able to calm the situation down. If you're angry, you're going to escalate. Do not do this. This is not the time to change the behavior or demand respect. All we want to do with the back of the brain person is calm them down. Okay? Think about The Breakfast Club. You guys ever seen that movie? Remember the scene with the principal? He's like, do it again, you get another detention. Do it again. I think the kid has like 150 detentions by the end of the scene. Well, he's trying to calm down a triggered kid. And where was the principal? Was he in the front of the brain?
he's in the back.
He's in the back too. So we got 2 people in the back of the bus where you wonder why the bus is going flying off the cliff. We got to stay in the front of the brain. We got to stay calm. Calm them down. If you need to get help, get help. Okay? But at the end of the day, once they're calm, now we can have that conversation. Hey, here's what you did. Here's your consequence. Like I'm saying, I'm not telling you they don't get held accountable. Absolutely hold them accountable. But wait till they're calm so they can process it. You cannot learn a new behavior in the back of the brain. It's impossible. This thing does not learn. That's why when kids are in the back of the brain at school, they don't learn anything. They can't. It's a physiological fact. We can only learn in this frontal lobe. And so we got to calm them down, give them the frontal lobe. Now we talk to them about what they did. Now we talk about do this differently. Here's your consequence to help you learn. I'm helping you learn because I love you. All that good stuff you guys do. And just think, are they in the front of the brain or the back of the brain? Okay. Here's a good picture. Kids getting escalated, teacher, could be parent, whoever. I've been this. I did this once last year as a football coach. I got escalated too, led to an explosion. Right? But who's supposed to be the adult? I am. Well, now if the kid gets escalated, I stay calm, I help guide that kid down, we're going to get a better outcome. And guess what? Sometimes you're going to do it perfect. Kid's still going to go up here and make an explosion. But the more often we can be that calm presence, the more often we can bring them down, the better. Okay?
If it's he going to explode, it would be better than both of us.
Amen. Amen. Right? And the more you explode, the more you're not a safe person.
Yeah.
Right? But the more they can blow up and you can stay calm, the more you're different than the other people they used to live with or that used to hurt them or et cetera, et cetera. Because the thing about trauma is, guys, the vast majority of trauma is relational. The vast majority of people get hurt by other people. And so we're mammals. We're designed to get close and keep each other safe, right? You look at rabbits. Everything's trying to eat a rabbit all day long. But what does it do when it gets home? It goes down its little burrow. It's got other rabbits. They snug up and they're safe, and that rabbit can chill. Cortisol levels go down. Life's safe, right? What about these poor kids where there's domestic violence or abuse going on? Well, they don't have their rabbit hole, right? And so their brain's been wired. It's not safe. It's not safe. It's not safe. It's not safe.
Well, sometimes when they go to bed, I notice they curl up. You go out the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's where they go.
Yeah, try to get away because maybe that's how they got safe in their last environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so but the cool thing is that every single interaction you have with them that's positive, they're getting new neural pathways going to the front of their brain, and the world is safer with. I mean, literally every smile. The new research is really clear that 50 1-minute positive interactions work a heck of a lot better than 50 minutes therapy. And so every moment's actually a therapeutic moment. Every smile. In my class, I literally meet all the kids at the door. Super excited to see you today. Hey, way to go. Hey, how was your weekend? Because I'm literally getting them new wiring every single time I smile, every single time I do a positive interaction. I'm excited to see you. Hey, great job with that assignment. New neural pathways, new neural pathways. And that's the power that we have. That's pretty incredible. And so those are all therapeutic moments every single time you do something positive. Because guess what? Those other folks that hurt them, yeah, they send a lot of neural pathways to the back of the brain, didn't they? But you guys get to build all the good ones. And you do it every day. And every single one will matter.
Yeah, smart.
Create a safe and supportive environment. Teach and model those social emotional skills. So once again, we're modeling it. That's the number one way they're going to learn. Manage your own responses to challenging behavior so you respond in a supportive way. We don't want to be reacting. That's that back of the brain stuff, right? We've all been there. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I teach parenting. I'm not a perfect parent. I mess up all the time, okay? Do your best. Reframe the child's behavior through a trauma lens, which involves being curious. So if you can get your magnifying glass out for triggers, eventually you're going to figure out what they are. You see them more than anybody else. I tell teachers this all the time too. If you got that magnifying glass out, eventually you're going to figure it out. Once you figure out the triggers, now we can remove them or cope. And then once we do that, they're not going to be triggered so much, and they're going to be a heck of a lot more manageable. You know, we're going to be a lot more successful with them. Structure and routine, we talked about that. Controlled choices, the ODD kids, if you have, I'm sure you guys work some of them, you know, the controlled choices is super important. They feel like they're falling if they don't have a choice. And so it can be do the thing I want or get this other thing you don't want, but giving them, if you only give them one path, they'll do something different every time to break that feeling.
Yep.
Set clear, firm limits. So there's a thing called the slot machine effect. If you're only a good parent 9 out of 10 days, it won't be effective. Like, you have to be super duper consistent. That's why people go to the boat and they pull the handle all day long, because they're waiting for that 1 out of 100. That's actually more rewarding than 50-50. 1 out of 10 is. Because the brain's constantly searching for that one little nut, right? Well, kids are the same way. If you're like, oh, I'm not feeling it on Sundays, well, you're throwing away all the good work you did before. And I know you guys know that, but it's a good reminder. Be sensitive to cues in the environment. So loud noises, weather alerts. I think this is big with the tornado. For some of these kids, I tried to talk to my school a whole bunch about this. We have to be super cautious. The next big storm, the next big tornado drill, all that stuff can be triggering for these kids. And then calm, predictable transitions. Increase self-worth, so the more we can help them identify their positive attributes, the better. Most of them haven't gotten any positive attention before. It's just been negative. And their brain's been wired that we would rather have negative attention than none. Right? So the more we can kill them with kindness, we can give them those positive interactions, the better. 10-to-1 is what they say it takes to rewire the brain. So we always grew up on a positive, negative, positive cookie. That's actually not sufficient. Research says 10-to-1. And so what I tell people is get the cheap, easy ones. I'm happy to see it. They didn't have to do anything for you to be happy to see them, right? Hey, great job getting your clothes on today. Hey, you put a fork in the sink. Like, you can just catch them doing all these little things positive. And that way, when you do have to have the conversation about the negative, you've kind of built up that equity. But get them hooked on that 10-to-1 and ask yourself, am I getting 10-to-1? I work with all the at-risk kids in my high school. Guess what? They mess up more than average. But if I can constantly give them that 10-to-1, you'd be amazed how much they're showing up my class an hour before school starts now. Because they like that somebody cares about them, that somebody wants to be positive with them. Teach them how to calm themselves down, slow and low. Okay, when we're talking to a triggered person or somebody that gets triggered easily, don't be like me with your arms flailing like I'm trying to sell a used car at a car lot, those windsock things. You know, you want to keep your arms at your side. You want to talk very slow. Their brain can only process a couple words when they're triggered. And so talking quiet, slow, and giving them, if you tilt your body, it's actually less threatening than if you square up on somebody. You know, with little kids, this drives me nuts. With little kids, the only people on earth we do this to, we get right up in their face. Well, how does that feel? It feels awful. It's scary for me too, okay? But we do that with little people. Well, guess what? That's threatening as heck, man. You wonder why that kid can't calm down. Like, give them some space. Talk quietly. Talk slowly. That stuff makes a big difference.
It's like I was trying to get down on their level.
Yeah.
So I get right in their face and I'm like, okay, honey, what's wrong? Why are you acting like this?
Yeah.
Why did you do that? You know, I
Right.
mean, so I'm right there. So
Well, I
now
think, and here's the deal though. You're smart.
And then back
If
off.
you're coming at them with a gotcha, and you're in their face, that might feel threatening. If you're coming at them as a warm, nurturing, loving thing, that can be interpreted two totally different ways, right? So if you're coming there to love up on them, to be calm, they might respond really, really well to that. They might not too. It might seem threatening to
Sometimes
a
they
kid.
don't.
Yeah, and so if that kid is threatened,
they're like back off. I mean, I will get down on their level, and they will actually like go like that.
because it feels threatening.
Backing up.
Yeah, so I'm glad you're sharing that once again.
Why are you doing that?
Because once again, people have hurt me, so I need space. I don't feel safe. And that's pretty good sign language, right? That I don't feel safe, right?
I mean,
And so for that kid, you might need
back
this
up.
might be an appropriate amount of space. Hey, you're having some pretty big feelings right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hey, remember we talked about doing this when you get upset? Because that might be as close as they can feel comfortable and safe. I like that you're kind of making yourself smaller and coming down to their level. That's okay, but you might need that
I
separation.
mean, they've been with us for 2 years now, and you would think I would think that they're
Yeah.
getting better, but they're not.
Well, remember we talked about with my wife 30 years. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying we can't heal over time, but because how long were the children in a abusive home before you got them?
Well, there were 5, 4. No, there were 5, 3, 18 months, and the baby was just born.
Okay. And so we know that the younger they are, the more damaging that stuff is, right? But you think about for that 5-year-old, that's 5 years of stuff we're trying to undo. And that same thing with Johnny, like it takes time. And I understand, like it's easy for me to say that, it's hard for you to do, but we know that, you know, it's hard. It's really hard work. And that's why you guys are superheroes. And I started my presentation with that. Like it's super hard work what you guys are doing.
I
It
see
is.
things that really trigger them, and it's like, oh my God, I would never have thought. In a million years, 2 years later, they haven't even been around the parents for
Mm-hmm.
a year.
But that amygdala remembers, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Like I said with my wife, 30 years. 30 years later, remembers. Like, because once again, it cares.
Things trigger me.
Yeah.
Something that happened years ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because safety is more important
like
than
that.
social acceptance, than
Yeah.
learning, than, you know. So I know it's a huge inconvenience because we're trying to help these kids heal. But if you think about from an evolutionary standpoint, from a brain science standpoint, from a like the human animal standpoint, it's super advantageous, right? It keeps us alive. And so, yeah, but it makes your job super challenging, no doubt about it. Help them identify with their feelings. So make them label their feelings. Okay, what do you feel? You know, like I love it. My son's 2. He's like, Dad, I'm sad. But I just love that. Like grows up in a home where we identify our feelings, and so you know he might get sad or mad all the time because he's 2, and he's constantly in the back of his brain. But I love that he can do that. I think that's super cool. And then teach them how to resolve conflict. Okay, here's some household ideas. Okay, I'm gonna go through them kind of quick. I do this with my class every day. We put a YouTube video on for 5 minutes. And we do 5 minutes mindful breathing every day to start class. I have some teachers who be like, well, how do you waste class? And this is not a waste. They act so much better after they've done this. They learn so much better because I give them the front of their brain. Now they learn the other 50 minutes I have with them. And so I do a 5-minute meditation. It could be breathing. There's a gazillion videos on YouTube. It's a great way to teach kids mindfulness.
What grade do you teach?
I teach JAGs till 9th or 12th.
You know Dakota Decker?
I do not.
Okay.
Gongs are great for elementary kids. You ring the gong, just tell them to hold their hand up until they can't hear it anymore. And they will be super quiet. And it's just a mindfulness exercise. They have to focus on the sense of hearing, but they love it. And they can hear it longer than you guys because our ears start breaking down over time. So, essential oils, the quickest way to the brain is through the nose. And so lavender works really, really well for that kid that's hyped up crazy. And then cinnamon sticks actually work really good if they're super flat and tired and lethargic. The cinnamon smell will wake them up, and the texture of the cinnamon sticks actually wake them up. So those essential oils work pretty good.
I need that.
Yeah.
I have lavender.
Lavender works good for me. I used to have to do,
lavender in the kids' rooms.
I did ER assessments at St. Mary's in the middle of the night. So you get called in at about 3 a.m. on call to deal with a psych assessment or a murder assessment. It wasn't real fun, right? So I couldn't fall asleep because I'm like, oh my God, somebody's going to call me and they're going to want to kill me. It's not fun. Well, my wife would just put a little lavender in my mustache and I'd be like they call it. But it worked. I couldn't believe how well it worked. Like, it's amazing. So This is some classroom idea stuff. I'll skip past that. This is you guys right now because you've been sitting too long. You were smart. You got up and woke your brain back up. Good job. Okay. Get them moving.
Wake up, wake up.
I kind of like this chart. The kids have to identify their emotional state, so they have to put where they're at. So this could be a good one when they come home from school and they have to put their little face by their different emotions. And so if all your kids come home and they're all down here, then maybe we need to do some sort of activity to kind of get them feeling better before we move on to homework or whatever it might be. So, but it's a great idea because they have to practice dealing with their emotions. Calm down jars are great. You don't always have a lot of time to give them, so you shake it up, just glitter and water and say, here's your emotions right now. I need you to do your coping skill, and then by the time the glitter goes down, you need to be calm too. So it kind of gives them a visual of my emotions are shook up, but I can calm them down. How Drake are you feeling today? Okay, this is a good one to get kids talking, especially at teenagers. If you ask them how you're doing, they'll be like, but you ask them how Drake are you feeling? Oh, I'm a 3 Drake. Whoa, 3 Drake looks upset. What's going on? They're like, well, my freaking girlfriend did this, blah, blah, blah. Now we're talking about, now we're identifying the feeling. Now we can resolve it. And so I find this tool actually worked pretty good. I did this at Fulton Middle School, and they had a class where everybody did one. So they had how SpongeBob be feeling, how Cardi B you feeling, like they all did one, which I thought was kind of cool. But it's a good way for them to practice identifying their emotions. Bio dots are really cool. You can buy these on Amazon for about 20 cents a dot. So you get like $20, you get a gazillion of them. You put them on the meaty part of the hand. They're just mood rings, guys. You guys all remember mood rings? Mm-hmm. But they measure hand temperature. And what happens is when you're stressed, your hands get cold because the blood leaves your hands and it goes to your core because your body thinks you're being threatened, and this is the important stuff. And so what you do is you plop these on kids, especially teenagers, but they work for everybody. You plop them on because they take that teenage boy, hey, you seem upset. I'm fine. You know what you're talking about. All right, can I put a bow dot on you? I've never had a kid turn down bow dot. They're undefeated. Okay? Slap it on this meaty part right here, and I'll say, man, it's black. That's not good, bud. It says you're stressed. Well, yeah, I'm pissed off because my mom, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. Let's talk about it. And well, then I'll say, if I take a high school boy and I say, hey, can we do deep breathing exercises till you calm down? Are they going to do it? There ain't no chance they're doing it, right? But I put a bow dot on them, and I go, hey, can you do deep breaths and see if you can make this thing change colors? They will breathe like they got Nintendo on their hand. They're like, and they see that thing change colors. And so it's super cool because they identify their emotional state, and then they use a coping skill. It doesn't have to be breathing, but breathing works better than anything. And they find that they can actually control their emotions with a coping skill. And so they get the feedback that it works. And guess what? You're not going to get purple. I've never seen purple. If you can, but green's good. If you can get them to green, that's good. So I usually keep them in the office till they get green. But it works. Okay. I actually had a lot of students come get these on finals weeks when I worked at class because they knew if they were stressed, they wouldn't do well on their tests because they'd be in the back of their brain. I had teachers that would take them. And they'd be like, oh, 5th hour, man, I'm always turning black. I have to calm myself down and cope. So they work for adults too. They're a pretty cool little tool. Trauma separates us. So once again, these kids typically feel isolated, alone. People have hurt me. I don't want to be around people. Okay. So we got to connect them. I think this is the most important thing. Teach them relationship skills. Teach them conflict resolution. Smile. Your smile is so powerful. I don't think we realize the power of our smiles. Smile, smile, smile. You're giving them new neural pathways every smile. Let them know you care about them. They're not alone. This could save a life. I really believe that. I love you. I care about you. You're not alone. I say that to my kids all the time. I love you. I care about you. You're not alone. Because they feel alone. The world's been really rough to these kids. Really hard. I love you. I care about you. You're not alone. Okay? I think that's super important. Apps. Calm actually started giving away an educator version for free. These are premium. You can use like half the app for free. This anxiety release is based on EMDR, but it pings your ears. And so if you have anxiety, I really recommend this one. It's $5, which isn't cool, but it works really well. And it'll ping back and forth, and it'll tell you, it'll prompt you to think about stressful things, and it kind of releases that stuff the same way it does with the EMDR going back and forth. I wouldn't say this, you replace EMDR therapist with this, but it can be a good little way for kids to calm down, or adults. Works pretty good. Big one here, guys. These kids are attachment seeking, not attention seeking, okay? They don't want your attention, they want a relationship. And sometimes they ask for a relationship in the worst ways possible. They just don't know how to get them. You know, I see this in schools all the time. The kids that are the worst are the ones that need love the most, right? And so I think reframing our language from attention seeking and attachment seeking is important. Instead of saying the kid's defiant, they're really in fight survival mode, okay? So changing how we look at these things. Instead of saying they're avoidant, they're in flight survival mode. But calling it what it really is big. Because a lot of these labels are actually really hurtful, right? We say, well, that kid's defiant. Well, that's basically saying, I don't want to deal with you, right? But if you look at it and say, well, that's a back of the brain behavior, now we're supportive and we want to help them out. Real quick, guys, we'll talk about how to build relationships. Step 1 is build a rapport. Don't start with what you want from them. This is the number one mistake I see people make. If I want to be your best friend, I'm not going to go, hey, can you mow my lawn? I have not had time to do it lately. You're not going to want to be my friend. You're going to be like, this guy's just, Think about going on a first date. You don't start with the thing you want, right? You got to. And so it's the same thing with kids, start out with what they're interested in. I talked to a kid for 60 minutes about LARPing the other day. Does anybody know what LARPing is? It stands for live action role play. They dress up like wizards. They throw beanbags at each other. Guess what? They got foam swords. Do you think that's what I do on the weekends? I don't, okay? But I want to know everything about it. Why are you into it? Where do you go? Is it safe? Blah, blah, blah. Well, by the end of that conversation, me and that kid connected because I started with what that kid wanted instead of what I wanted, all right? Smile, smile, smile. Be consistent. Once you got that rapport built, we got to get them to feel better about themselves, okay? Do you guys have all your retirement and Blockbuster stock? Is anybody going all in on Blockbuster? Okay. Well, these kids, they feel like Blockbuster. And so we're like, hey, go to school for 13 years, work hard, change your life. And they're like, are you kidding me? Blockbuster ain't going to work out, bud. It's bad stock. Well, we get them feeling better about themselves, point out what they're good at, they're talented at, their gifts. A lot of times, I just did this with my class. We talked about all the horrible stuff they've been through. We talked about how many strengths they got because of it, how resilient they are, the skills they learned. So many times these kids have they have a superhero inside of them. They just got to recognize it and celebrate it. You're not worse than, you're better than, you're stronger than. Get them to celebrate that. Now they start feeling like Netflix stock. Well, now they'll start doing stuff. Now they'll start paying attention to school, working hard, doing the stuff they need to do to be successful.
We've had some of our kids that we wondered about.
Yeah.
We've always found out that each one of them has been art.
Yeah.
They can draw.
Right, isn't it? I agree with that. That's very true.
No matter where their brain is,
right,
they can draw, be creative. And I've always, I'm like, you
see that connection.
You tickle me because you're all over here, but then you make something like this.
Yeah.
I go, where's it come from? They go, I just started drawing.
Right. I believe that all great art comes from pain.
Yeah.
I look at like all the great artists, musicians, sculptures, clay, whatever. Like you hear their backstory and like, oh my God. And so I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I really believe that too. And I look at my class. I literally have a wall where they can put their art up, and they bring me stuff every day, and they're putting it on that wall. And I agree because I think there's a lot of pain there. And I think that expresses itself through art.
And then what they draw is expression, because you'll see that in some of our cases were skulls, death, stuff like that.
But that's what their life experience has been, right?
When they go, well, don't you like it? And I go, no, I like it. I just don't like death.
Yeah.
Draw me something else. Well, one of our boys then drew a picture of, what did he draw? Himself? I can't remember what Daniel drew. But it was rose.
The rose he
Yeah, and that's what you wanted,
He made a rose. I mean, we framed it.
Oh, wow. Cool. And what a great way to celebrate that gift and to find a good expression for it. And it's awesome. Awesome. So once we got them figured out, we got the relationship, they feel better about themselves, now we do the SMART goals. And so I have kids all the time that come at me with crazy goals. I had one that was like, I'm going to go to college to play video games. And I remember thinking, well, that's not even a thing. But I didn't tell him that. I said, well, hey, you got to pass English class because you got to graduate high school to play college and video games. Well, guess what? We got him on board because he wanted to play video game college. He ended up getting like a $40,000 a year scholarship doing esports. I didn't think that was real. And so kids sometimes have crazy dreams, and that's fine. And sometimes they'll surprise us. But at the end of the day, if we can use that to motivate them today, that tends to be the best way in my opinion.
We've done that a lot. We've had some boys that, we had one in particular wanted to be a gamer, create games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, well, how's your math done? Oh, not that great.
Yeah.
And we go through all of it. Then he realized,
I need this stuff.
I got to have this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, I was a horrible student. I had a lot of my own problems, and I wanted to play high school football and then college football. That's what kept me straight. I didn't get a dang master's degree. I figured out later on, hey, I'm not a dummy. I'm actually kind of smart. But I had to go through all those steps, and the people dangled that carrot for me. Hey, you want to play high school football? I can't get those Fs. Hey, you want to play college football? You got to graduate. You got to get these grades. You got to get this ACT. Oh, I want to keep playing football. I'd still be playing if they'd let me. I wasn't too old. And then at the end, guys, help maintain progress. Human behavior is not linear. Has anybody ever tried to lose weight? Am I the only one that's ever been on a diet? Did you lose 1 pound a week until you disappeared? Right? It's not how it works, right? So you make progress, you fall back. Kids are the same way. They're going to do well. A lot of times you have a honeymoon period, and then they want to see if they can push you away, right? They're going to do well until it's Christmas or something reminds them of their family or their trauma. That's normal. That's natural. Catch them and get them back on track. Healing physically, a couple big things here. You know, the big ones I see kids, they don't get enough sleep, and then they drink tons of Monster. I had kids come to my office, oh, I'm so anxious. Well, tell me, well, I got 2 hours of sleep and I drank 6 Monsters. Well, you're not anxious. Your heart's just blowing out of your chest because you drink those chemicals, okay? So sleep, eat real food. I'm telling you, they're actually finding that nutrition works better than psych meds. If we get good sleep and we eat real food, we tend to do really well with our emotional health. Rhythmic motion actually heals the brain from trauma better than anything else. The number one activity they found that works better than anything is fly fishing. And so I went down to McKay Park in Jeff City, and I go around the lake, and I see Vietnam, Gulf War, all the Korea War, all these hats, and these guys are all fly fishing. Well, guess what? Nobody wrote in the script, hey, rhythmic motion heals the brain from trauma. They just figured it out on their own. This helps me feel better. And so jumping rope, playing baseball, all these kind of rhythmic activities, most sports are pretty rhythmic, actually heal the brain. Band with the drums, all that kind of stuff, that stuff all heals the brain from trauma. So the more these kids can get involved, the better. Yoga works super good if you get kids involved in yoga. There's a gazillion good research articles on that. Stuff works. Exercise more. I showed this joke to...
NBB.
I showed this joke to a bunch of kids, and they were like, why does the hoverboard have a stick coming out of it? So they didn't even know what a Segway was. So I'm glad you guys get my jokes. All right, so I'm going to start wrapping up, guys. Hey, Johnny's a real kid. He's doing great. He's in middle school now. Okay, and he had a super high A score at a super young age, and he's doing awesome because he had those superheroes. He had that superhero grandma that took him in. He had a superhero counselor that literally took a punch for him, all those great teachers. That's what it takes. Like, trauma's not a death sentence, okay? They can be every bit and even more successful than other people, but they need superheroes like you guys to make it happen, okay? That's why I can't give you enough love for the work you do. I'm going to show you this pup real quick. Nice dog, mean dog, okay? But most of the time with kids, we got to get past the teeth and we got to see the pain because that's what's going on. Way too often we see the teeth and we don't think we don't think about the pain, okay, that they've been through.
How's my baby doing?
We need to stop asking what's wrong with you and start saying what happened to you. And this is what a psychiatrist start asking. That's the question. Not what's wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is operating the way it's supposed to. What happened to you? That's the question we got to ask. I want to skip past this real quick. Guys, post-traumatic growth, I'm a big believer in that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a lot of post-traumatic growth in this room right here. Because typically the most empathetic, loving, awesome people have gone through trauma themselves, and they want to help others. And so these kids, you might get them in different stages, right? On this side. But guess what? You're this person. You're the helper mentor that's going to help transform them. And they're actually going to be better, stronger, more resilient people because of the trauma they went through if they can heal. You know, if we go through all that trauma and we end up using alcohol and drugs and risky behaviors, yeah, then maybe we're not going to end up on this upslide. But if we can get that help, that love, support, and we can cope with this stuff in healthy ways, we actually become better. Not that we'd ever want trauma on anybody, but people can become better because they went through that. Okay, and I think this tree is a great visual of that. That tree is more beautiful because it got blown over. It's not less than, it's more than. And these kids are the same way. I see it every day in my classroom. They're all little superheroes. They have all these great strengths. We just got to guide those talents, and it's amazing what they can do. The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely they will recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agent of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. Guys, that's the stuff that works. That's the stuff that you're already doing. The love, the connection. That's what heals. Love, connection, relationships. When kids have those, they thrive. Sometimes it takes a long time. I agree, man. You're out there grinding every day. You're doing the hard work. You literally got a sledgehammer and you're hitting a rock over and over again. And I'm going, that thing will break eventually. And you're like, my back hurts. My hands are blistering. I know you guys are out there sledging every day, but I promise you, that's the stuff that works. That's the stuff that you're doing, okay? And I commend you because this is you guys right here. I really believe that. You guys, you're putting on the outfit every day. You got your bat belt. Hopefully you got a couple more little tools that you can use.
I want to say Batman today.
Really?
Yes, my 2-year-old.
There you go.
He just started talking.
Oh, I love it. It's a fun age.
He's a little behind, but
Yeah, we'll get him caught up. Still got all that neuroplasticity too. So here's my info, guys. If you want to take a picture of that, if I can support you anyway, don't be afraid to shoot me an email, or you can call me. That's my Twitter. If you do on Twitter and you like reading a lot about trauma, you can tweet you up. You can follow me up.
Twitter.
But and if you want a copy of the presentation, just shoot me an email.